stabbed to death back in November. Today, the man that police are accusing of killing them is set to be making his first appearance before a judge. 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time is the time that the Latah County Court has set to have Bryan Kohberger's initial appearance. So this is an appearance where he is going to be advised of the charges against him. Bond will be set. This is just the first quick appearance in front of a judge. We expect this to be very, very brief. There's a formal arraignment later on in the process. This is just the initial arraignment in front of a magistrate judge. And the court has put into place some rules for this with our cameras. Our cameras are there ready to rock and roll, but we're not able to broadcast it live. We're only able to share the video after the hearing has concluded. So we will do that immediately. Our team is there. Just moments ago, you heard me talking with Chanley Painter on the phone. She's our correspondent in the courtroom. She's going to be heading in there. And this may be the first time that the family members of those victims will be able to see the man who's accused of killing their loved ones face to face. This is probably going to be a very tough day with those family members, we are told, expected to attend. We also have standing by in Pennsylvania by phone, Court TV legal correspondent Julia Janae, as Pennsylvania was the big link to this case. That is where Bryan Kohberger spent much of his life. That's where his parents still live. Was spending the holiday break with them when SWAT hit the house and took him into custody just before 2023. And he was extradited, as we know, yesterday back to Moscow, Idaho. I have Court TV anchor Ted Rowlands as well in the studio with me. We're combing through the affidavit of probable cause in support of this guy's arrest. 18 pages, many, many details we want to share with you, and we want to highlight some of the biggies for you now. So if you're just joining us, we thank you for that. Let's look at some of the biggest things we've been able to glean so far from why police said this guy is their guy. Number one, Xana Kernodle, one of the victims killed, we understand was the first victim that first responders found. They found her on the first floor, in a bedroom of the second floor, excuse me, I misspoke there. She appeared to have wounds caused by an edged weapon. So we're taking this directly from the affidavit of probable cause. Police also said that Kernodle's boyfriend, Ethan Chapin, was also found in the second floor bedroom. He appeared to have sharp force injuries. The other two victims were found on the third floor, we know. Kaylee Gonsalves and Madison Mogan were found in Mogan's bedroom on the third floor of the house. They were both on the bed. Both of them had visible stab wounds on their bodies. And then this detail, which I think is one of the biggest coming out today in this case, police finding what appeared to be a tan leather knife sheath laying on the bed next to Madison Mogan's right side. The sheath was processed and had this lettering you see there on it. And the big thing is that the snap on the sheath case had some DNA. We don't know what type of DNA. We don't know if it was blood. We don't know if it was spit, sweat. Had some kind of DNA, it says, on the snap that they were able to take in and process it at the crime lab. And we know later on, investigators went through the trash at this guy's parents' house. That is fair game, folks. Trash in America, fair game to go and test. Did some genealogical testing, zeroed in on his dad, process of elimination, made them like him as their guy. Bryan Kohberger is the guy they say carried out these sick homicides that happened in Moscow, Idaho. I want to bring in Ted Rowlands for some reaction. Ted, of all these details we're looking at here, tell me, what is the one that's the most stunning to you, the most disturbing, fascinating?
Well, from an evidentiary standpoint, the DNA is the home run.
Yeah.
But the fact that the roommate had an encounter with this individual face to face. He was wearing a mask, according to her testimony, or according to what she told police. She said that she heard her roommates, she thought she heard them crying at one point, and then opens the door, and there's a masked man walking out of the house.
Right.
Now, could the mask have been look like a COVID-type mask? It just, that to me is chilling.
Oh, you're 100% right. Without a doubt, I think the most chilling detail. So DNA, to me, if I had to highlight the biggies as we're taking them, chronologically throughout the way this affidavit's laid out. DNA, the fact that they were able to get something left at that crime scene, huge. Then the fact that there's an eyewitness in the house, one of the roommates. Roommate Dylan, we understand, it says right here, she opened her door for the third time after she heard crying, saw a figure clad in black clothing and a mask that covered the person's mouth and nose, walking toward her. That she described the figure as 5'10" or taller, a guy, not very muscular, athletic build, and bushy eyebrows. She could see the eyebrows, apparently, folks, because the mask just covered the bottom part of his face. He walked past her, and she told police she stood in a frozen shock phase, and he walked toward the back sliding glass door. So this person, this killer, whoever it is, whether it's Bryan Kohberger, as police say it was, or somebody else, this killer made a deliberate choice not to kill roommate Dylan. My question is why? Why those 4 people you see right there? I mean, thank goodness he didn't kill more people. Thank goodness that those 2 roommates were spared and the dog that was in the house, but I am still waiting for that link, Ted. Are you? The link, why these 4?
Absolutely. I mean, well, we do know from the affidavit as well that he was stalking the house. According to the cell phone, they ran his number, and they were able to trace it on 12 occasions starting in June of last year in the proximity of the house. Was he watching them all? Was he watching one of them? Was this a target for just one of them, and the others were collateral, the other 3, and that's why he walks by Dylan? A lot of unanswered questions here. Another bit of, this is bad, this is so sad from the families, for the families. A security camera located apparently very close to where this took place. I don't know if it's actually in the house, but it's less than 50 feet from the west wall of Xana's bedroom. There's a security camera with audio that, according to the affidavit, picked up at 4:17 a.m. distorted audio of what sounded like voices or whimpering, followed by a large thud. And the dog can also be heard barking numerous times. So there's, while some, I think as we all put together the pieces here, all right, there's 4 dead, but there were these other 2 kids. They must have slept through it. I think the thought was, and I bet as a parent, my thought was like, well, at least maybe the kids were like literally killed while sleeping, This
sounds like they're awake.
Much different
right?
Story.
It's everything we're reading here sounds like they were awake, and others in the house heard them and heard things that were suspicious.
Yeah.
This is very, very unsettling, folks. As you know, our hearts break for those victims' family members who are going to be seeing Bryan Kohberger in the flesh for the first time since his name has been announced, and he's been arrested on these charges. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to hit a break. We're going to talk to Julia Janae. She's standing by in Pennsylvania. Stay with us and tweet us your thoughts as well. Go to our Court TV network handle on Twitter. It is @CourtTV. Send us your questions, your comments, your thoughts. We're assembling a panel of experts this afternoon to help us continue digging in on all facets of this case, the law enforcement aspects, the aspects of the autopsies, the way in which these children were brutally murdered, and of course the psychological aspect. No matter if it's Bryan Kohberger, remember, he's innocent. He's innocent unless and until he's proven guilty. But what's the psychological profile of a person who can carry out this kind of a heinous crime? We'll talk about that as well coming up later in the broadcast.
right now.
Welcome back to Court TV Live, your front row seat to justice. I'm Julie Grant. We continue following breaking news at this hour with defendant Bryan Kohberger making his first court appearance since he's been returned to the state of Idaho to face homicide charges in the case of the 4 Idaho University students who were stabbed to death back on November 13th. This is a look of his fresh new mugshot from the Latah County Jail there in Idaho. That's where he woke up this morning and presumably is before the judge right now. 12:30 p.m. Eastern was the time he is set to make his initial appearance, which we expect to be brief, but the court rules do not allow us to broadcast it live. They say we have to wait till the hearing concludes, and then we'll share with you the live video. In the meantime, we are digging into what was just unsealed today, folks, and that is the affidavit of probable cause in support of Bryan Kohberger's arrest. So this is everything law enforcement needed to make the arrest in the case. They're laying it out here, and this is rich with juicy details, folks. We weren't sure what we were going to get today, if this was going to be a very brief affidavit. You know, we've seen all sorts of things in different criminal cases, but this one is quite voluminous in the way of details, 18 pages. And I want to hit the 3 big highlights we've seen so far. Cell phone records place Kohberger at the crime scene. They also show that he was possibly stalking these victims on 12 other occasions. Investigators able to glean that from the cell phone records. Number 2, there was some DNA left behind on the knife sheath's button. There was a tan knife sheath left near Madison Mogan, and on the snap of it, they were able to take a DNA sample. They went through Kohberger's parents' trash can over in Pennsylvania, did a genealogical DNA test, were able to narrow their suspect to Bryan Kohberger. Also, number 3, and this is perhaps the most chilling, disturbing, stunning detail in this affidavit, and that is one of the roommates who survived that massacre saw the killer walking out of the house. Dylan, roommate Dylan, who survived this, was unharmed. There wasn't even an attempted attack on her. She tells police that she saw a guy in black clothing and a mask, about 5'10", not real muscular, but looked kind of an athletic build and had bushy eyebrows, walked past her, and she stood in a frozen shock phase. Those are her words. Let me bring in now Court TV legal correspondent Julia Janae. She is standing by for us in Pennsylvania by phone. Julia, you've been combing through this affidavit. Tell us, please, what else is really jumping out at you?
Julie, I'm interested in what police were interested in that we didn't know how it would play into it. We've been here in Pennsylvania looking into this defendant's educational record, his work history, the things that may have led up to his time in Washington. And I see in this probable cause affidavit that police were actually interested in his education as well. They included it in the probable cause affidavit, noting that he was not only a PhD student, but that he was also someone who had an undergraduate degree in psychology and cloud-based forensics. But get this is something I did not know. I knew that he had been a school security officer here in Pennsylvania at his alma mater, so he was actually around students, around kids. But they say in the fall of 2022, that could have been any time right around the time of these murders, that he applied for an internship with the Pullman, that's in Washington, Police Department. And that in his essay for that internship, that he said that he had an interest in assisting rural law enforcement agencies on how to better collect and analyze technological data in public safety operations. This was someone who was entrenched in law enforcement, wanted to be close to crimes on the solving side, but now to be accused of this, it's still befuddling, Julie.
It certainly is, Julia. And just to kind of keep piggybacking on what you're saying here about this guy's background, his fascination with criminology, the studies he was doing currently, I'm seeing, and I want to draw your attention, please, Julia, to page 11 of the affidavit. And it says here that police were aware of that Reddit survey. This is something we've talked about. It's been, widely speculated on about, was it in fact him who posted that Reddit survey? internet searching is how police got it. And he was asking for participants to provide information to, quote, understand how emotions and psychological traits influence decision-making when committing a crime. So this jumped out at me, Julia. I'm curious if it did you too, as like something that we thought police were gonna, of course, look into that, be aware of that, and here this checks that box really for us that they were.
Right, and that they believe that it was him the way that we believed it as well. This is something that he was conducting at DeSales University when he was getting that criminal justice master's. And it was only May of last year, so about 6 months before the murders, where he wanted to talk to, we don't know who he got to talk to, but he wanted to talk to people who had committed crimes. And something that has jumped out at me in my research of that particular part of this is that he also made a note in the survey that if a person had not been arrested or incarcerated or convicted of a crime, they could still participate in the survey. He still wanted to hear from people who had gotten away with their crimes. But we don't know how much that will play into the trial, whether it'll be the prosecution that'll use it or the defense, because we know it's been reported but has not been confirmed that he may have asked police if anyone else was involved, but no officers have put on the record that that did in fact happen. But it's in the back of our minds, Julie.
Most certainly, Julia. Thank you so much for all of that. You're going to continue reading and analyzing all of the information in this affidavit for us. We're going to check back in with you in just a short while. We're going to squeeze in a break, folks. Bryan Kohberger in front of a judge in Latah County Court, assuming this is happening right now. Our cameras are not permitted to show it until the hearing concludes. At that time, you will see it right here on Court TV Live. Don't go away.
18 or older to order.
Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Julie Grant. What you're looking at is a live picture of the outside of the Latah County, Idaho courthouse, where defendant Bryan Kohberger is making his initial appearance on the homicide charges relating to the stabbing deaths of those 4 University of Idaho students. Kaylee Gonsalves, Madison Mogan, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin all brutally lost their lives back on November 13th. And weeks passed without answers. Many in the public were questioning, speculating, wondering if police would ever find a suspect for these crimes. And we learned just before the new year that they had a suspect in mind, defendant Bryan Kohberger, a 28-year-old PhD student going to school in Pullman, Washington, which is just about 15 minutes away from Moscow, Idaho. So even though we're talking different states, very, very close physical proximity. And we know that Pennsylvania is where his parents lived and where he was arrested, in their house. That was also a place, as we've learned today through digging through the affidavit of probable cause, that investigators were able to gather some evidence. Through the trash at his parents' house was how they were able to make a DNA link. So I want to hit the highlights for you folks. We're digging through these 18 pages of this document. The biggies, the DNA, there's a link. There's also an eyewitness. One of the surviving roommates saw the killer. Roommate Dylan was unharmed. The killer walked right by her. That is huge, absolutely huge. Why there wasn't a 911 call placed at that time, who knows? But here we are today, folks. And we also know that cell phone data places Bryan Kohberger in the vicinity of that house on King Road in Moscow. I want to bring in Court TV anchor Ted Rollins, who's been analyzing these documents for us. Ted, could we talk a little bit about the window, the time frame? I know that's been something you've been really honing in on and trying to pinpoint when exactly this took place. What can you share with us, please?
As we were talking earlier, you know, there was a feeling that maybe all the kids were asleep and someone crept in there. No, there was activity in the house. Xana receives a Grubhub order or DoorDash, 4 a.m., receives it. Investigators found the driver, cleared him or her. They realized that person did not have anything to do with this. The suspect's vehicle, Kohberger's vehicle, is the one they believe he's in, is identified in the area, but he's still driving at 4:04. At that point is where they apparently lose it. He does a 3-point turn and goes towards the house. That vehicle then pops up again, moving at a rapid speed at 4:20 on surveillance video. So the window for a quadruple murder, in this case with 6 people in the house, is 16 minutes. And that's what the video tag, it's probably a little less than that. That's when the car is actually seen moving. So you got to shave a minute or 2 off of that. This happened very quickly. The cell phone records place him at the house 12 different times since June of last year. So he had to have had familiarity with the home. He may have done this other times, gone up, checked that sliding glass door, locked. He walks away, goes home, goes back to Pullman. In this case, in 15 minutes, 4 kids are dead. And the suspect is off and running at 4:20, moving with that vehicle. If you look at this case, you know, we were wondering how strong is this case gonna be? We don't know. They're ticking off pretty much every box. And
You're right.
they've got an eyewitness. I mean, who would have thought that one of the people that are gonna walk into that courtroom is an eyewitness that's gonna say he walked right by me, and he had a mask on, but he has those bushy eyebrows, and that's a huge component when you fast forward to trial, because you add the DNA is massive. Let's face it, that's number one. There's DNA attached to him. They swabbed him when they arrested him in Pennsylvania. That's already back. It's a guaranteed. But the rest of it, I mean, this is a slam dunk.
This is so tight. this affidavit, I mean, this is a great affidavit of probable cause.
We weren't sure if we could 3
Bravo.
lines better.
Exactly, Ted, right? You know, because we've talked about this. Sometimes, you know, they're really rich with details, other times no, and because it's not proof beyond a reasonable doubt, as you know, at this stage, this is just probable cause. It's a lower level to be able to effectuate an arrest in America. And something else I wanted to pick your brain about, please, Ted. We've talked a lot on the shows about how police said they never recovered the murder weapon, and there's nothing about it here. And we were kind of scratching our heads, well, how did law enforcement put out that description of they're looking for a military-style knife? Now we know, don't we? Because of what was written. Yeah.
K-Bar, which is a brand of knives, and then it also had USMC, military, the Marine Corps.
Right.
So that was that initial, which was a leak, but because they went around to knife stores right away.
Oh, I bet.
Whatever you thought about this investigation, there's no action. They did a great job.
They sure did.
And they sure showed it here.
Absolutely, they did. And I have to say, too, as we're kind of wrapping up this hour, but there's so much more ahead, kudos to the Pennsylvania State Police, the SWAT team, everybody who safely apprehended him, got him out of the house, and everybody who got him back to Idaho yesterday. Ted Rowlands, excellent analysis and insight from you, as always. Thank you so much for your help in breaking this down. Folks, stay right there. We're going to take a quick break. Our crew is in the courtroom in Idaho. We're going to show you this whole hearing in just a couple of minutes. We'll see you on the other side here on Court TV Live.
Detectives arrested 28-year-old Bryan Christopher Kohberger.
You never know. Like that, our neighbor was, a possible quadruple murderer.
It is official. Bryan Kohberger has just made his first court appearance in Latah County, Idaho, to face homicide charges for the brutal stabbing deaths of 4 University of Idaho students. Welcome to this hour of Court TV Live. I'm your midday host, Julie Grant. Our camera crew was there for it all. We were able to film things, but according to the court rules, we weren't able to broadcast anything live. They're allowing us to show it all to you at the hearing's conclusion. So as soon as we get that video back in our system, we're going to share it with you live here. We're also going to talk to correspondent Chanley Painter, who's been inside the courtroom. We're going to find out if family members of those victims, Madison Mogen, Kaylee Gonsalves, Xana Cornoto, and Ethan Chapin, those 4 beautiful young people who lost their lives in such a brutal way back in November of 2022. We understand their family members were going to be appearing in court. Of course, they're seeking justice, and this may be the first time they were coming face to face with Bryan Kohberger, the man that police are accusing of carrying out these brutal crimes. Kohberger is 28 years old and a PhD student. He was studying criminology about 15 minutes away from where these kids lived in Moscow, Idaho. He was studying at Washington State. This is his mugshot from this morning. There you see him waking up in the Latah County Jail. Here's what we're doing. We are digging into the affidavit of probable cause. This thing is rich with details. Let me tell you, folks, and we've assembled a power panel to go through it all and hit every aspect of it, the law enforcement aspect, the forensic pathology aspect, and of course, the mental aspect. Who could do such a thing? Let me bring in my guest now in the studio with me, retired DEA Special Agent Ted Golden, standing by remotely. We have triple board certified pathologist Dr. Peter Cummings and forensic psychologist Dr. John Delatorre. Great to have all of you gentlemen here. Agent Golden, let me start with you, please. There were some things that you predicted. You've been on this show many times talking about this and how they were going to get their suspect. One of them, the cell phone records, the digital footprint. Your thoughts,
It's
please.
the biggest telltale there is when it comes to committing a crime, especially when you're in proximity of other people's phones. The ability to be able to locate, pinpoint someone's phone where they are within 20 feet now is something you just can't get away from, and it's a telltale sign that usually ends up catching people, especially when they're committing these kinds of activities.
Right. Dr. Peter Cummings, you are triple board certified in forensic pathology, anatomic pathology, neuropathology. You are published. And I want to pick your brain about the forensic pathology aspects of this. We don't have much information on anything gleaned at autopsy here. We just have some details that police have shared about coming upon the bodies of those young people. But a couple things stood out that I wanted to ask you about, please. The officers observed that Xana Cornoto was found with wounds that they say appeared to have been caused by an edged weapon. And then we see next to Madison Mogen, on the right side of her, there was a leather knife sheath left laying on the bed. And on the snap of that sheath, they were able to extract some DNA. The sheath had language on it. You could see it was a U.S. Marine Corps in anchor insignia, stamped on the outside of it, and had the letters, KA-BAR. I remember talking with you, Dr. Pete, about this, and when police were saying we're looking for a military-style knife, and you told me, you said there's no way they could glean what kind of a knife caused these wounds. There's no way they could know that at autopsy. And now when I saw this, I thought of you immediately. I thought, aha, now they know why it's military style because of what was stamped on that case. Doc, your thoughts, please.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's a conversation you and I have been having since this all happened. Is they're looking for what's called a fixed back knife, which means the blade is in the handle, opposed to a knife you can open up like a jackknife or a switchblade. That's very specific, and that's not something you can really get from an autopsy. So my question had been to you is how do we know that information, and where does that come from? And now we know. And from the details of that case that the knife would have to be placed in, if you put like attach it to your belt or something like that, is very specific. It has the United States Marine Corps symbol on it, so you can be very sure that's a fixed back knife. That didn't come from the autopsy. It came from the current crime scene processing. And when you see a sharp force injury in an autopsy, they put it together and said, we have a sharp force injury, we have a knife case, we're looking for a military style knife. So it was, I think, a piece of information that, probably didn't want to make public. It would have been something I would sneakily go along to different stores and look around and ask about, but certainly a very important piece of evidence.
Definitely, Dr. Pete. In another follow-up on that, when I see the language they use, they talk about Xana Kernodle's injuries caused by an edged weapon, and Ethan Chapin's appeared to be caused by a sharp force injuries. I'm quoting the language directly. What's the distinction, please, Dr. Pete?
Sure. It could be a couple different things. And sometimes it's very difficult in an autopsy to make this determination. When you look at the blade of a knife, it can either have a double edge where both sides are sharp, or a single edge where only one side is sharp. Like think of your typical kind of knife in the silverware drawer has only got one edge on it, where you might have some more intricate knives that have edges on both sides, so both sides can cut. When I hear edged weapon, it's telling me that there's only a single sharp edge here. So one of the wounds would have had a very nice kind of detailed flat edge with a triangle, almost like a pie piece shape to it, which would have been a pretty good indicator that you're talking about a single-edged weapon. If you had had a double-edged weapon, it would have looked more like a diamond-shaped type wound that you would be able to say this is probably a double edge. Sometimes you can't tell, sometimes you can tell, and here you have a sharp instrument that caused wounds that's edged, which means I have one sharp edge to that surface.
This is really fascinating stuff, Dr. Pete. Thank you for sharing that. Dr. John Dellatoria, I've got questions for you coming up, but we're just getting word that we have that video back right now from Bryan Kohberger's hearing. Let's watch.
Are witnesses called against you? Call witnesses on your own behalf and compel witnesses to be present and testify at the state's expense. You have the right to be represented by a lawyer. If you cannot afford one could be appointed to represent you based upon your financial need. You also have the right to appeal any conviction in your case. Do you understand these rights?
Yes.
I am now going to go over the criminal complaint with you. Count 1 of the criminal complaint charges you with the felony offense of burglary. It alleges that the defendant, Bryan C. Kohberger, on or about November 13th of 2022, in Latah County, state of Idaho, did unlawfully enter a residence located at 1122 King Road, Moscow, with the intent to commit the felony crime of murder, in violation of Idaho Code 18-1401 and 1403. The maximum penalty for that offense, if you plead guilty or are found guilty, is not less than 1 year in prison, no more than 10 years in prison, and or a $50,000 fine or both. Do you understand?
Yes.
Count 2 alleges that you committed the felony offense of murder in the first degree. It alleges that the defendant, Bryan C. Kohberger, on or about November 13th, 2022, in Latah County, state of Idaho, did willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, with premeditation, and with malice aforethought, kill and murder Madison Mogen, a human being, by stabbing Madison Mogen, from which she died, in violation of Idaho Code 18-4001, 4002, 4003, and 4004. The maximum penalty for this offense, if you were to plead guilty or be found guilty, is death or imprisonment for life. Do you understand?
Yes.
Count 3 alleges that you committed the felony offense of murder in the first degree. It alleges that the defendant, Bryan C. Kohberger, on or about November 13th of 2022 in Latah County, state of Idaho, did willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, with premeditation, and with malice aforethought, kill and murder Kaylee Gonsalves, a human being, by stabbing Kaylee Gonsalves, from which she died, in violation of Idaho Code 18-4001, 4002, 4003, 4004. Again, the maximum penalty for that offense, if you plead guilty or are found guilty, is death and/or imprisonment for life. Do you understand?
Yes.
Count 4 alleges that you committed the felony offense of murder in the first degree. It alleges that the defendant, Bryan C. Kohberger, on or about November 13th of 2022 in Latah County, Idaho, did willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, with premeditation, and with malice aforethought, kill and murder Xana Kernodle, a human being, by stabbing Xana Kernodle, from which she died, in violation of Idaho Code 18-4001, 4002, 4003, and 4004. Again, the maximum penalty for that offense, if you plead guilty or are found guilty, is up to death and/or imprisonment for life. Do you understand?
Yes.
Count 5 alleges that you committed the felony offense of murder in the first degree. It alleges that the defendant, Bryan C. Kohberger, on or about November 13th of 2022 in Latah County, state of Idaho, did willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, with premeditation, and with malice aforethought, kill and murder Ethan Chapin, a human being, by stabbing Ethan Chapin, from which he died, in violation of Idaho Codes 18-4001, 4002, 4003, and 4004. And again, the maximum penalty for this offense, if you plead guilty or are found guilty, is up to death and imprisonment for life. Do you understand?
Yes.
And Mr. Kohberger, would you like to represent yourself, hire a lawyer, or see if you qualify for court-appointed counsel?
I have court-appointed counsel.
Court has reviewed your application for attorney at public expense. I do find that you are indigent and do qualify for court-appointed counsel. I will appoint Ms. Taylor to represent you in this case. Ms. Taylor, have you had an opportunity to speak with Mr. Kohberger about speedy preliminary hearing and setting this matter?
Your Honor, I have. We would ask the court to set the status hearing in a week or two to make a final determination.
Okay. And Mr. Thompson, Ms. Jennings, are you in agreement with that?
That's fine with the state, Your Honor.
I will go ahead and set this matter for a status hearing then on the calendar on January 12th at 10 o'clock a.m. We will make sure notice is sent. And then, Ms. Taylor, do you wish to argue bail at this time?
Your Honor, I would like to ask the court to consider setting a bond. Mr. Kohberger right now is on a no bond hold, but it's a limited request as I don't have enough information. We are new to the case. We haven't reviewed very much in the way of information about the case, and we have just begun our own work on the case. But we would want the court to know that Mr. Kohberger has a good family that stands behind him.
And Mr. Thompson.
You know, the state's position is that Mr. Kohberger is not entitled to bond in this case. We can take charges as is noted on the arrest warrant itself. Idaho Code 19-816, 19-2903 both specify that given potential penalties in this case, there's no right to bail. The defendant was arrested 3,000 miles away across the country, where his family is. We would ask that he remain in custody. No bail.
At this point, point in time, pursuant to Idaho Criminal 46B and Idaho Code 19-816 and 2903, I am going to leave the bail set of this case as no bail at this point in time until I have additional or further information at a later date and time. So with that, then, Mr. Kohberger, you will be remanded in custody and remain in custody on the no bail pending further proceedings in this matter. Is there anything further in the case then for today, Mr. Thompson?
Commissioner, the state is asking for no contact orders for various family members of deceased and also for surviving roommates. I've spoken briefly with Ms. Taylor. She indicated there's no objection.
Ms. Taylor, is that correct?
That is correct.
So I will go ahead and issue those no contact orders. So I do have a no contact order then for the named individual of Dylan Mortensen, Bethany Funk, as well as the family members and Mr. Chapin, the family members of Ms. Kernodle, Mr. and Ms. Laramie, Mr. Mogan, Ms. Cheeley, and then a number of members of the Gonsalves family. Those specific names will certainly be provided to you, Mr. Kohberger, by way of being provided notice of these documents. You'll get a copy of these no contact orders. What you do need to be advised of and what will be in this no contact order is you are prohibited from having any contact with them whatsoever. You cannot contact them through third person, in writing, or by any electronic means. You cannot Facebook, Snapchat, Twitter, Instagram, use the phone to communicate with them, or otherwise any form of communication in direct or indirectly with them. You cannot engage in any conduct that would harass, stalk, threaten, use, attempt to use, or threaten to use any physical force or violence upon them, or place them in reasonable fear of bodily injury. Cannot go within or knowingly remain within 300 feet of their person or their home, workplace, or any other place where they might be. There are no exceptions to these orders, and if you do violate these orders, it is a new misdemeanor offense. It is punishable by up to a year in jail and or a $1,000 fine or both. At this point in time, due to being in the magistrate's division here, at this juncture, I am going to issue the no contact orders for a period of 2 years, and then if it needs to be modified or changed by additional judge, it can be done so at that time. Is there anything further, Mr. Thompson?
No, Your Honor.
Anything further, Ms. Taylor?
No, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. We are adjourned.
And with that, Bryan Kohberger's first court appearance in Latah County, Idaho concludes. This guy's going to go back to jail and be held without any bail. So he's going to sit in jail until this case proceeds to the juncture of trial, or if we have some kind of a plea take place prior to then. The next court date, January the 12th, 10 a.m. He's going to be back in court. A status conference is just basically a way for the attorneys to go before the judge, let them know what's going on with the case. Everybody kind of convenes. Where are we? What's next in the proceedings? Because this one is so high profile, can see why they'd want to do this quickly. And at that hearing, we'll see what's next. We'll see how the state is going to be proceeding here. Remember, this one is eligible to be pursued as a death penalty case. The state would, of course, have to file that notice. And Kohberger's got his attorney. We saw the appointment take place there as well. I want to bring in now Court TV legal correspondent Chanley Painter. She was in the courtroom watching everything unfolding. Chanley, we're so anxious to hear about who was in the gallery. If you saw the family members, tell us everything, if you would, please.
Yeah, Julie, we waited in line for a while to enter into this courtroom. Family members were on the front row of the gallery. We had the Gonsalves family, their family attorney, Shannon Gray, the family actually giving a statement right now. We're going to bring you what they have to say ASAP. The father of Kaylee Gonsalves sat in the middle, flanked by his wife, Christy, his son, Kaylee's brother, as well as Kaylee's sister, who's been vocal as well. Kaylee's father, Steve Gonsalves, had his arms around both his wife and his son and had his eye on the door that we knew to be the door that Bryan Kohberger would enter. Remember, his attorney telling us that he wanted to look this guy in the eye. As soon as Bryan Kohberger entered the courtroom, he didn't look back towards the gallery. He looked down and then sat down at the table, looking only towards the judge or his attorney and Taylor to his right. So I had my eyes on Steve Gonsalves, Julie, and he looked at Bryan Kohberger nearly the entire time they were in that courtroom during the hearing. Looks, glares. I wish I could more adequately describe the look on his face as he stared towards Bryan Kohberger, the man he believes stabbed his daughter, Kaylee Gonsalves, to death. At times, he did glance over to the judge when he talked, but it was definitely intense there in that moment. I was sitting right behind them on the second row in that gallery. Bryan Kohberger, he walked in. He had a great posture. He seemed a bit confident. I know we just watched him there, but he would look directly to the judge. He would confidently answer her questions, yes. He also would nod his head in response to most of what the judge was saying, even when she said the names of the victims he's accused of stabbing to death and the ones that he left to survive, the roommates. He would nod his head at that. And then he was stood up and escorted out. He was not shackled at his hands, but he was shackled at his ankles. But he didn't seem to have trouble walking. He was escorted and flanked by many of the sheriff's deputies escorting him in and out of the courtroom. It was quick. It was a jam-packed courtroom. Media here from all over, and members of the public here as well who waited in line to have a seat inside the courtroom. I sat next to one lady who's a criminology PhD student. She was emotional. This has personally touched her. She actually, after the hearing was over, went and said something to the Gonsalves family, giving her condolences to them, and Steve Gonsalves actually stood up and hugged this lady before they left the courtroom, Julie.
Jenny, I want to hear more, please, about the family members. Did you see anyone becoming emotional? Because one could only begin to try to imagine just how upsetting this would be to be in court for a hearing like this.
Oh, absolutely, Julie. I'm glad you asked, because during the moment, initially, the family seemed stoic and strong, just had their arms around each other. But then as the judge read the charges against Bryan Kohberger one by one and naming each of the victims' names, that's when it affected this family. The first was for Madison Mogan. But that second first-degree murder count was for Kaylee Gonsalves. And as soon as the judge said Kaylee's name, her mother broke down into tears. She had a tissue in her hand wiping her face. You could hear some silent, soft sobs coming from that family, and again, comforting each other. People that sat behind them on down the road put their hands on their shoulders to comfort them in those moments as they heard their loved one's name. I have a couple of updates from the statement from the family that was just made out front of the courthouse. It was only Shannon Gray, the attorney that represents the Gonsalves family, who spoke to the media very briefly. Essentially, he said this is an emotional time for the Gonsalves family after seeing the defendant in person for the first time. And they said this is the only statement that they're going to make. Steve and Christy Gonsalves stood next to their attorney looking very somber, but did not say anything publicly. Media, as I was standing here to be live with you, Julie, was swarming, literally running across this parking lot behind me to make their way to hear this statement. But we will have actual video of this statement soon, so we can show our viewers that very short statement from this very still distraught, emotional family here. But wanted to make sure they were here again to see this person they believe murdered their loved one.
What a tough, dreadful day. And this is only the beginning. We know that this is going to be a long process. The details in this affidavit of probable cause, though, very stunning and quite solid evidence that the state of Idaho is going to be able to bring against this guy, Bryan Kohberger. Defending him is going to be no easy task, certainly. Chandler, what can you tell us, please, about his attorney, the woman who was there seated with him today?
Yeah, her name's Ann Taylor. She is the public defender for Kootenai County, which is about 2 hours north of here in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. She has been already on this case. We heard her name Tuesday when he waived the extradition hearing. And has been working already. In fact, yesterday when I stopped by the crime scene, the people that are staked out there, as well as Fox News, even reporting that she has made a visit already to that crime scene. Probably one of the reasons they halted the cleanup of that home last Friday after Kohberger's arrest. It was scheduled to be cleaned, but they halted that process by a court order. Likely because they wanted to make sure the defense team of Bryan Kohberger had an opportunity to also bring in their own investigators and to take in that crime scene to prepare a defense. And that, according to sources, has been done, and they've been visiting that home. And again, 5 minutes from where I'm standing here from the courthouse is the crime scene. So she has been already working hard on her behalf, on his behalf, even filing some documents, and was there sitting with him today inside the courtroom, Julie.
Sounds like he's got excellent counsel. He sure will need it on charges like this, as you know. Chanley Painter live for us there in the Latah County courthouse area. You're going to be staying throughout the day, Chanley, and gathering more information. We'll look forward to talking with you in just a little while. I want to return to my power panel for some quick reaction before we squeeze in a break, as we are nearing the bottom of the hour. In the studio with me, I have retired DEA Special Agent Ted Golden, standing by remotely, Dr. Peter Cummings and Dr. John Delatorre. I want to kind of go around the horn and get reactions, and then we're going to be digging deeper on these details throughout the afternoon. Dr. John Delatorre, let me begin with you. What jumped out at you with what we heard today, please, in court?
In court, nothing much really stood out to me. He was definitely more calm and collected. I think people probably thought that he was going to be a little bit more demonstrative, but I'm not surprised that he's just sort of accepting what exactly it is that's going on, because this is something that he is familiar with as being a criminology student and having a degree in criminal justice.
Yeah, was it surprising at all to you that he didn't look back at the gallery, that he just kind of stayed focused on looking straight ahead, looking toward the judge, looking toward his attorney?
Well, no, he does look back. There is this time when he briefly glances back. I thought he was maybe looking at the camera the same way that the judge was looking back, but now with Chanley Painter describing where the father was sitting, I think he was probably just trying to glance back at him. So he does look back. He does acknowledge everything that's going on in the room. It wasn't as necessarily as stoic. He is aware of everything that's going on. He's just paying attention to the judge.
Most certainly. Dr. Pete, you also do trial consulting work as well. You serve as an expert witness, and I was pretty impressed by what I heard Chanley telling us about the attorney representing Bryan Kohberger, that she's already been doing her homework. I mean, prior to even the court appearance, she was reviewing the evidence. Your take on that, please.
Yeah, I got so many thoughts as a former scene investigator, as a medical examiner, and as a trial strategist on this. That's an incredibly experienced move, and he's definitely got good counsel. Because the problem is, how are you going to defend this? I mean, there are multiple layers of evidence here we can go through, from DNA to cell phone records, and the affidavit's so detailed that what jumps out at me, all of this, and is that the best way to solve a crime, no matter what technology you have, is shoe leather, and it's police work. And this looks like some really fine police work that was put together here, and so now the prosecution story looks very clear. Now you question, how you're going to defend this if you do, or if you take a plea, or what happens. So there's a whole bunch of strategy and science still have to be discussed here, for sure.
Oh, most certainly. We're going to talk about that. I want to pick your brain about the DNA, Dr. Pete, coming up. And first, I want to turn to our police officer on the panel, Ted Golden, who served with the Memphis, Tennessee Police Department, then did federal work with the DEA for many, many years, retired as a special agent, still does consulting with courtrooms and in the Atlanta area. Tell me, Ted, when you look at this affidavit, you have been writing and taking copious notes since you walked in the door today at Court TV and got your hands on this like we did. You've written a lot of these, you've reviewed a lot of these, you've been at trial where these are, being discussed. Tell me, how strong, in your opinion, is this affidavit?
It's very detailed. It's very exact. It's actually got, I think, too much information in it.
And why do you say that?
Because you don't want to give up too much of what you have and on the front end. You kind of want to make sure you hold some stuff back because this allows the defense attorneys to be able to pull out what they want and try to focus on the issues that they can confront.
Yeah.
But this is an ironclad affidavit. I hadn't gotten through all of it yet, but it clearly has all of the things that you need to make sure that you confirm. You know, identity, who saw what, when, where, and how, and then the fact that he was confronted before he walked out of the place and she's still alive. That's even good. It's even better. But realistically, it's a very well-written document, and I expect that we don't see all that they have, because there's some things that I would have done ordinarily that I don't see here yet, and I think that they did a fantastic
There's still
job.
more. You're saying there's still more.
I think there's more.
Good supportive evidence.
There should be more.
We'll talk more about that. Ted Golden, Dr. Peter Cummings, Dr. John Delatorre, thank you all kindly. Stand by, please. When we come back, we're going to take you to Pennsylvania. Our Julia Janae is standing by there to dig in on the link to Pennsylvania with this case. We know there was DNA evidence left at the crime scene, and police were able to go through the trash at Bryan Kohberger's parents' house in PA. We'll explain the link coming up next.
Tonight on Closing Arguments, the Idaho college student murders. What new developments have we learned about the defendant, and what can we expect next in the investigation? We're live from Idaho with today's biggest moments. And who were the Murdochs? From the generations of lawyers before him to the wife and son he's accused of killing, we'll break down the relationships surrounding the disgraced lawyer as we count down to the trial.
Closing Arguments with Vinny Politan, tonight at 8/7 Central, only on Court TV.